No one had seen a human ship in over a century. Not since the collapse. Not since Earth burned itself out in wars of pride and power, and the remaining colonies fell into silence. The Galactic Empire thought the humans had finally done what everyone predicted. They wiped themselves out. And the galaxy moved on. Or, at least, it tried to. But now, in the middle of the Empire's most secure sector, above the glittering skies of Virel Prime, something tore reality apart. It didn't slip through a wormhole. It didn't arrive with the buzzing hum of regulated hyperspace. It didn't send a comm beacon ahead. It just appeared. A single warship. Old. Black. Scarred like it had lived through 1,000 battles, and won every single one of them. It was massive, easily 4 times the size of an Imperial Dreadbreaker, yet its design didn't match anything in the known archives. No insignia, no markings, no heat signature. Just silence. The Imperial fleet was caught off guard. Not a single one of their sensors had picked it up until it was already within range of the planetary defense systems. Alarms screamed across Virel Prime as their satellites finally registered the presence. Emperor Kalrix himself watched from the Citadel spire, high above the city. His 3 hearts beat in dissonance, and his second set of eyelids blinked in disbelief. "What in the void is that?" he asked, more to himself than to the advisors scrambling behind him. High Marshal Torin stepped forward. We believe it's a human vessel, Your Eminence." Kalrix turned slowly. His scales darkened with rage. "That's impossible. Humanity is extinct." Torin swallowed. "Respectfully, sir, that is no longer accurate." Before Kalrix could respond, the warship moved. Not with the slow, calculated grace of modern Empire vessels. It shifted like a predator. No visible propulsion, no warning. It slid through space like it was swimming, and the fleet didn't know whether to fire or run. They did neither. They hesitated. That was their mistake. A single pulse erupted from the ship's underbelly, silent, colorless, and faster than light. In the blink of an eye, 4 Imperial cruisers ceased to exist. No explosion, no wreckage, just gone. Disintegrated at the molecular level like they'd never been built. Panic didn't just ripple through the Empire, it erupted. All communication lines lit up, emergency protocols activated, civilian transports were grounded, and the planetary defense grid switched to full power. But none of it mattered. Because that ship, whatever it was, just hovered there, still and silent, like it hadn't even started yet. Torin's voice cracked. "We need to open a channel. Maybe it's a rogue AI. Maybe it can be reasoned with." Kalrix hissed through sharp teeth. "You want to talk to it?" "We don't have a choice." They tried. The Empire's finest diplomats, xenolinguists, signal techs, codebreakers, broadcast every known frequency. They spoke in 100 languages. They begged, demanded, threatened. The ship never responded. But eventually it acted again. A transmission came through. Not a voice, not a message. Just a single image, burned across every comm screen, from the palace halls to the outer moons. A human face. Old, cold, staring. A face marked with years of war and loss. And beneath it, written in galactic standard, only 4 words. "We never left. Remember." The image faded. The panic didn't, because the Empire knew something then. Humanity hadn't vanished. They'd just been watching. And now they were back. The face haunted them. Every corner of the Empire, from the highest command posts to the smallest mining outposts, had seen that face. Gray eyes, wrinkled skin. The face of someone who had survived everything and regretted none of it. No name, no voice, just a warning. We never left. Remember. The Empire didn't know what to remember. They had buried humanity in their history logs, declared them a failed species, a warning of unchecked aggression and emotional volatility. The last human colony had gone dark 97 years ago, and the Empire had celebrated its final victory without ever firing the last shot. Humanity had imploded, they thought. But now, one ship, a ghost from Earth's grave, had wiped out a third of their outer fleet in seconds. Back at the Citadel spire, Emperor Calrix was no longer calm. His claws dug into the arms of his throne as advisors shouted and screens flashed with reports of rising unrest. Civilian broadcasts were in chaos. Words like ancient weapons, human revenge, galactic extinction were trending across every known media stream. "Have we found the origin of the ship?" he growled. Torin, pale and shaking, replied, "No signal trail, no entry point. Our long-range sensors showed no hyperspace tear. It's like it phased in from somewhere else." "You mean they developed tech beyond the Empire's reach?" Calrix said, more bitterly than inquisitively. "Impossible. We scouted every world. We destroyed every lab." "They must have survived in exile," said a new voice. A younger one, General Mirren, newly promoted. Half her face was cybernetic, the result of an old border war with the Jadari Confederacy. She rarely spoke unless she had something worth listening to. Calrix turned toward her. "You believe this is an intentional strike?" She nodded. "Absolutely. Not a test. Not a scouting vessel. That ship came here to be seen." "To show power?" "Number to remind us we're vulnerable." The room fell silent. Calrix hated silence. "We need options," he snapped. "Solutions, not theories. What assets do we have nearby?" Torin answered immediately. "Orbital Defense Platform Helios is within striking range, armed with nuclear plasma lances. It can respond in minutes." "And if it fails?" Mirren added. "If that ship wants us to attack?" Calrix ignored her. "Send the order." Torin hesitated. "Your Eminence, this could be seen as an act of—" "Do it." Within minutes, the command was sent. Helios turned its lances toward the human warship, each weapon the size of a tower, designed to destroy rogue moons and incoming asteroids. This was the Empire's most powerful defense installation. The warship didn't move, didn't respond. Just drifted, silently, ominously above Virel Prime. The lances fired. The sky lit up like a new sun was born. Radiation, plasma, magnetic shockwaves, all slammed into the black warship with full fury, and nothing happened. The lights dimmed. The warship remained untouched. Not a single scorch mark. Then, for the first time, it moved. Not slowly, not deliberately. One moment it was in orbit. The next, it was inside Helios. Somehow, impossibly, the ship phased through the defense platform. Surveillance cut out for 4.3 seconds, and when the cameras returned, Helios was empty. Gone. Every crew member, every weapon system, every scrap of metal, like it had been vacuumed out of reality. Only one thing remained, hovering above the ruins of the station, a human flag, charred, torn, ancient, but unmistakable. The Empire stared into the void and realized this wasn't an attack. It was a declaration, and humanity had just announced its return to the galaxy. Not as victims, but as a power the stars had long forgotten to fear. Whispers of surrender started spreading through the Imperial Senate by morning. The Senate, usually bloated with pride and empty threats, had never experienced such terror. Helios wasn't just a station. It was a statement. A monument to the Empire's dominance, to the fear it once instilled across 1,000 worlds. And now it was gone. Not destroyed, not even wrecked, erased. The message was clear. Your power means nothing. In the inner chambers, Calrix's fury turned inward. He didn't scream anymore. That would be weakness. Instead, he paced, silent, calculating, breathing through his gills as he considered every move that didn't end in the Empire's humiliation. "They're baiting us," Mirren said, still standing tall while others cowered. "Into what?" Kalrik snapped. "Another failure? Another weapon we don't understand?" "Number into making a mistake, one they can use to justify whatever they're planning next." Kalrix narrowed his eyes. "You speak like you understand them." She paused. "I've studied them. My thesis at the War College was on early human warfare tactics. I was mocked for it." Kalrix sneered. "Perhaps they should have mocked you harder. Perhaps they should have listened." He said nothing, but his silence was permission enough. "Their wars were personal," she continued. "They didn't fight for planets or treaties. They fought for revenge, for honor, for ghosts. And when they couldn't win with strength, they used fear. They let their enemies destroy themselves with paranoia." "Are you saying we shouldn't act?" "I'm saying someone needs to talk to them." That idea sent a wave of uncomfortable shifting through the room. Talk to a human? A relic species? A ghost of chaos? But Kalrix had been Emperor long enough to recognize the real threat. Not the ship, but the image it projected. Fear was spreading faster than any weapon. Civil unrest was already sparking on 5 core worlds. Military captains were questioning their orders. Fringe systems had started defecting, sending silent signals of allegiance to whoever these humans were now. "They planned this," Kalrix said, almost to himself. "They waited until we were too fat, too self-satisfied, too arrogant. They've probably been watching us for decades." "Centuries," Mirren said. "They didn't survive. They thrived. Somewhere out there they've been building, hidden from our sensors, hidden from the galaxy. And now they've come to remind us what we forgot." A sudden transmission cut through the room like a blade. It wasn't Imperial. It wasn't even broadcast. It forced itself onto every screen, hijacking every frequency, even those deep within secure military channels. And this time, there was a voice. Gravelly. Human. Male. "You forgot us. That was your first mistake." Silence. "We watched. We remembered. Every colony you burned, every leader you executed, every child you told the stars weren't for them." A pause. "We didn't die. We adapted. You evolved in peace. We evolved in war." Static crackled. "We offer you a choice, submission or extinction." The signal cut. No coordinates, no response to counter signals, just a broadcast heard by everyone. And the galaxy trembled. Back in the chamber, Mirren was the only one breathing steady. Torin stammered, We need to mobilize the core legions." "Alert the Inquisitors. Activate the Vault protocols." "No," Mirren said calmly. "They'll expect that." "Then what do you propose?" She stared at the screen that now showed only the Empire's flag, slightly trembling, as if uncertain of its future. "We find them," she said, "not to fight. To understand." Kalrix turned slowly toward her. His voice was quiet now, too. "And if they don't want to be understood?" Mirren's cybernetic eye flickered. "Then we pray they haven't changed as much as we have." Because deep down, she feared the truth everyone else refused to say. The Empire had built itself on the myth that humanity was dead. And now, with just one ship, one face, and one sentence, that myth had become a nightmare. Across the stars, the Empire's borders began to bleed. Outposts went dark. Trade convoys refused to fly. Systems on the edge of Imperial space began broadcasting strange signals, coded messages in dead languages, some even using old Earth dialects long erased from official archives. But someone had kept them. Someone had waited. Within the Empire, paranoia bloomed like a plague. Governors turned on governors. High-ranking officers accused each other of human sympathies. Even in the military, whispers of the return grew louder. Some feared it. Others secretly welcomed it. And in the shadows of Varel Prime, someone celebrated it. Kyle Voss had lived many lives. Spy, assassin, traitor, survivor. He didn't care what label they used anymore. All he cared about was the truth he had buried for years. The humans weren't extinct. And now, they were here to finish what they started. Cale watched the chaos unfold from a darkened observatory buried beneath the capital's surface. From there, he could see the entire system unraveling one transmission at a time. And in the center of it all, hovering like death made real, was that ship. He smiled. "Took you long enough," he muttered. His comm clicked. A voice spoke on the other end, soft and mechanical. "Is the Emperor preparing for war?" Kyle leaned back, eye catching the glimmer of red tracking lights across the warship's hull. "He's preparing for his own funeral. He just doesn't know it yet. You've done well, Agent Voss. We'll be arriving soon. Phase 2 begins within the day." Kyle's smile widened. "And the girl?" There was a pause. "She'll remember when the time comes. We made sure of it." He nodded. Somewhere on Varel Prime, hidden in the labyrinth of society, a sleeper agent, a human born and raised in secret, was already waking up. Planted there decades ago, raised to believe she was imperial, trained, conditioned. And now, with the ship's arrival, her memories would start coming back. A war wasn't coming. It had already started. Years ago, and now it was unfolding exactly as planned. Back in the Citadel, Mirren stood alone on the command deck. She had sent every available scout vessel out to scan fringe space, hoping to trace any data signatures left by the human ship. So far, nothing. It was like chasing a ghost with no shadow. But her instincts screamed louder than her logic. They were here for a reason. Her mind turned to the warning: submission or extinction. But those weren't options. Those were declarations. The humans weren't here to ask for anything. They were giving the Empire a chance to surrender, yes, but not because they feared war, because they knew they would win it. A junior officer approached her quietly. "General Mirren, there's been a development." "What kind?" "Unauthorized access of restricted surveillance footage. Sector 9C, Imperial Archives Vault. Footage was copied and erased before we could contain the breach." Her eyes narrowed. "Who accessed it?" The officer hesitated. "It's classified. Eyes only." "I am eyes only," she snapped. But even as he handed her the datapad, she knew something deeper was unraveling. The footage showed a child, dark-haired, human features, being smuggled into the Imperial capital under false registry 20 years ago. The name listed? Lyra Mirren. She stared at the screen. Her name. Her face. But she didn't remember that child. Didn't remember being anyone but General Mirren of the Imperial Armed Forces. Her hand trembled slightly, datapad slipping from her fingers. No. The ship didn't just come to intimidate the Empire. It came to wake its weapons, and she was one of them. Lyra didn't remember falling. One moment she was standing on the command deck, datapad in hand, watching the face of a girl who wore her eyes, her mouth, but not her memories. The next, she was on her knees, surrounded by silence. Her officers didn't move. They didn't speak. None of them knew what to say to a general who'd just found out she might be a traitor to everything she stood for. Her breath came in shallow, clipped gasps. She barely heard the voice of the junior officer, stammering something about medical assistance. She waved him off. She didn't need medicine. She needed the truth. Back in her quarters, sealed, secure, buried under 5 levels of access codes, She accessed her personal files, scrubbed them clean. No history before age 10, no school photos, no early medical logs, all standard for military-born children. But now it reeked of fabrication, and the more she dug, the worse it got. She had always wondered why she didn't remember her parents, why she was raised by the state in the military foster program. They said her family had died in an asteroid mining accident, that there were no bodies to recover. She had asked questions once, got punished for it. After that, she didn't ask again. But now she couldn't stop. She stared into the mirror. For the first time, she looked at herself, not as a decorated general, not as a hardened warrior, but as a question without an answer. And then, a whisper. Not from the room, from inside her head. A voice she didn't recognize, yet felt buried deep in her bones. You are not theirs. She froze. Who said that? Silence. Her pulse raced. Another whisper, gentler now. You've always been ours. She stumbled back from the mirror. Her reflection shifted. For a split second, the glass didn't show her Imperial uniform. It showed another version. Same face, same scars, but dressed in black battle armor, marked with the sigil she'd only seen once. On the flag left behind on Helios. The human flag. The image faded just as fast, but it was too late. Something was waking up inside her. She ran a scan on herself. DNA, neural pathways, psychological profiling. All of it came back, altered, modified, not recently. This was old tech, ancient almost, human-made, designed to bury memory, delay identity, triggered by something. Something like that ship. And now the lock was broken. She sat on the edge of her bed, palms over her face, trying to calm the storm in her chest. Her comm chimed. Encrypted. Unknown origin. She almost ignored it. Then she didn't. She opened the channel. Kael Voss's face appeared, calm as ice. Hello, Lyra. Or should I say, Commander Lyra Thorne. The name hit her like a punch. I don't know you, he smirked. You will. Soon. What the hell is happening to me? You're remembering. Remembering what? He leaned forward. Who you are, what you were born for, and why you were placed right where you are now. This is a trick, some psychological weapon. It's not a trick, it's justice, Alyra. We're not here to destroy the Empire. She laughed bitterly. You erased an entire space station. We're here to replace the Empire, one piece at a time, starting with the pieces they stole from us. She stood, pacing. Why me? You're one of us, a true-born child of the Resistance. They took you when you were 5, reprogrammed you, raised you to kill your own kind. Her hands curled into fists. If that's true, why did you wait? Why now? He looked past her, almost sad. Because now you're ready. The screen went black. No signal trace, nothing, just silence. But her mind wasn't silent anymore. It screamed with flashes, broken memories rising like ash from an old fire, a woman's voice, a man holding her hand, a place not made of steel and fear. A promise that one day she'd come back to them. And the warship still hovered above Varel Prime, patient and watching. Because it wasn't just there for the Empire. It was there for her. The rain came down hard that night. Varel Prime rarely saw rain. The climate regulators over the capital were designed to keep things pristine, dry, and sterile. But tonight, the system failed. Or maybe someone made it fail. Either way, the sky opened up like it was weeping. Lyra walked through the storm with her coat pulled tight. No guards, no shuttle. She needed to feel it. Every drop, every step, every part of the city she thought she had protected all her life. Because now, she wasn't sure who she had been protecting it from. Kael Voss had shattered everything. Or maybe he had just peeled the truth back. Commander Alira Thorne, she whispered to herself. The name felt foreign and familiar, like hearing your own voice in a recording, recognizable but distant. She didn't know where she was going until she got there. The Imperial Archives, specifically Sub-Level 12, unauthorized access was treason. Every corner was tracked, every vault monitored. But Lyra wasn't just a general. She was the general. She still had command override. And now she wanted answers the Empire had buried. She entered the code. Her fingers moved without hesitation, like they remembered something her conscious mind hadn't caught up to. The vault hissed open. Rows of old physical data chips lined the room, dusty and forgotten. No one bothered with hard backups anymore. That was the mistake. Humans didn't rely on convenience. They hid their secrets where machines couldn't reach. Her eyes scanned quickly. Then she saw it. A file labeled Thorn, Redacted. Her breath caught. She inserted the chip. The terminal flickered to life, slower than the newer ones, but it worked. A series of logs appeared. Images, audio files, DNA reports. Her mother, her father. Both confirmed members of the Orion Reclaimers, one of the last human resistance cells before the collapse. But they hadn't collapsed. They had evacuated. One video showed her as a toddler, sitting on a metallic floor, drawing the stars. Her mother's voice behind the camera. She keeps drawing the same constellation. Every day. Like she remembers something we haven't taught her yet. Another file. Blurry footage of an Imperial raid. Soldiers in dark uniforms dragging her parents away. She, barely 5, was wrapped in a blanket, injected with a sedative, and carried off by a man in gold-trimmed armor. High Marshal Vren Targus. She blinked. That couldn't be. Vren Targus had been Kalrix's mentor, the one who built the military foster program, and he had taken her. Her entire life had been fabricated by the people who murdered her family. She clenched her jaw, shutting the terminal off. Her hands were trembling, but her mind wasn't. For the first time in her life, it was clear. As she turned to leave, her calm crackled to life again, unfiltered, unsecured. "General Mirren," came a frantic voice, "you need to return to the command deck, now." "What happened?" "It's the human ship. It's gone." "What do you mean gone? Did it leave orbit?" "No, ma'am, it disappeared." She paused. "Disappeared how?" "Not cloaked, not jumped. Gone. Sensors never even registered a hyperspace signature. Just vanished." Her heart thudded. "Were there any traces left behind?" The officer hesitated. "Yes, ma'am. One thing." "What?" "It dropped something. A pod. It landed outside the capital. No tech signature. Organic-only trace." She froze. "Coordinates?" The officer read them off, and Lyra's breath left her chest. She knew that place, a forested zone just beyond the outer districts, designated uninhabitable, sealed off for decades. But now she remembered. It had been her sanctuary, before they wiped her mind, before they told her she belonged to them. Without answering, she killed the comm feed and turned back. The warship was gone. But the next phase wasn't. It had just begun. The forest was nothing like she remembered, or maybe it was exactly as she remembered, just through the wrong lens. Back when she was a child, the Empire told her it was a restricted zone, contaminated during the planetary terraforming experiments. But there were no toxins here, no radiation, just silence, soil, and trees older than the capital itself. Lyra moved through the undergrowth with slow, steady steps. Her weapon stayed holstered, but her hand never strayed far from it. She wasn't expecting an ambush, but she wasn't naive either. The pod had landed somewhere in this zone. "A message," Kale had said. Or maybe a trigger. Her boots crunched on brittle leaves. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray and heavy, like the world was holding its breath. The deeper she went, the more the sound of civilization faded. No transports, no security drones, just wind and memory. Then she saw it. Half buried in the earth, nestled between the roots of a gnarled tree, was a pod. Not military, not like anything in the Empire's database. It was smooth, blackened metal, scarred with use but intact. No lights, no hum. It just sat there, humming in silence like a sealed confession. As she approached, it responded. A faint pulse rippled across its surface, and the shell split with a soft hiss. Inside was no weapon, just a child, no older than 6, pale skin, dark hair matted from sleep, breathing, unconscious, wrapped in a thermal layer that bore the same insignia as the flag left on Helios. Lyra's breath hitched. She crouched slowly, trying to understand what she was seeing. Why would they send a child? Then the realization hit her like a lightning strike. It wasn't a message for the Empire. It was a message for her. This wasn't just any child. It was her, the same eyes, the same nose, a perfect genetic match. She didn't need a scanner to know. The humans hadn't just woken her memories. They'd restored what the Empire stole. Her unaltered self. The pod wasn't time travel. It was time preservation. Somehow they had taken a biological imprint of her before her abduction and saved it in stasis all these years. Why? For leverage? For backup? Number for truth. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the girl's forehead. Warm. Real. Alive. Behind her, a soft rustle. She drew her weapon instantly and turned. Kyle Voss stood in the clearing, arms raised. "No need for that," he said. "You've already remembered." She didn't lower the gun. This isn't possible." He stepped closer, slow and calm, like approaching a wounded animal. "It's not a weapon, Lyra. It's a mirror." "Why show me this?" "To remind you who you are, what they turned you into, and what you can still become." Her hand shook. "She's me. She was you. Before they erased it. Before they trained you to be their sword." Lyra stared down at the girl, something fragile cracking open inside her. Memories came faster now. Her mother's voice, warm hands tucking her into bed, stars painted on the ceiling of a rusted hull. "You said I was placed here for a reason," she said, voice low. "What reason?" Kyle's eyes darkened. "To destroy the Empire from within." She didn't flinch. "Not this time. You want me to assassinate Kalrix?" "Number that would make him a martyr. We want you to take something far more valuable." She turned to him. "The military?" He shook his head. "The truth. We want you to speak it. Not in secret, not in shadow. On the Empire's own channels, on the Senate floor. Let the people see what they've done, what they've built their power on. You. And if they don't believe me, they don't have to. They just have to hear you. The truth will do the rest." Lyra looked down at the child again. Her own face, pure, unbroken. "I don't know if I can do this." Kale's voice was softer now. "You already are." Behind them, the sky cracked open. The warship was back, only now it wasn't alone. They didn't hide anymore. Not the humans, not their ships, not their truth. By the time Lyra returned to the capital, 17 human warships hovered silently across the Varel skyline. No cloaks, no warnings. They positioned themselves like monuments, not invaders, watching, waiting, daring the Empire to act first. And for the first time in centuries, the Empire didn't know how to answer. Inside the Citadel spire, the Senate chamber was in chaos. Senators screamed for war, demanded blood, begged for guarantees of safety. Generals argued. Advisors whispered of coups. A few even began quietly boarding escape vessels. The myth of the Empire had cracked. Fear was seeping in like floodwater. And then the doors opened. Lyra walked in alone. No guards, no armor, just her black officer's uniform, creased, rain-stained, and utterly silent. Eyes turned. Whispers followed her like smoke. The Emperor sat above them all, unmoved. His golden armor gleamed beneath the chamber lights, his gaze cold and reptilian. "You return now," he said, "as our skies are occupied. Explain yourself, General Mirren." She looked up at him, and for once there was no fear in her. "My name," she said, voice calm, "is Commander Alira Thorne, born on the human colony vessel Sola Terra, abducted during the siege of Diraxis, indoctrinated under the Empire's orphan program, raised as your weapon." The chamber froze. She tapped a small device in her palm. Every screen around the room flickered, showing raw, unaltered footage from the archives. Her childhood, the raid, the fabrication of her identity, the voices of her real parents. "You built your power on lies," she continued. "On genocide, on erasure lies," Kalrix growled, standing now. "Treasonous slander from a broken mind." She stepped forward. "You didn't just destroy our worlds. You stole our children. You made them forget, made them kill in your name, but we remember now." The room erupted. Screams, accusations, threats of execution. Lyra raised her voice above the storm. "We don't want your throne." She turned to the cameras broadcasting to every world across the Empire. "We want your people to see, to choose, not through fear, through truth." Above them, the warships began broadcasting her speech across the galaxy. Every outpost, every station, every home. Some wept, others raged, but no one ignored it. In a single moment, the face of the Empire cracked, and something older and stronger began to rise beneath it. Memory. Kalrix stepped forward, claws flexed, his voice trembling with fury. "You think one speech, one half-blood child can break 1,000 years of rule?" Lyra met his eyes. "But your own lies will." She turned her back on him and walked out. He didn't follow. He knew. It was over. 3 days later, the warships left Varel space. No city was burned. No empire was conquered. It collapsed on its own. Governors defected. Fleet admirals surrendered. Systems declared neutrality. People refused orders. And through it all, the truth kept spreading like wildfire. The Empire's heart didn't explode. It simply stopped beating. And as for Lyra? She disappeared from public view after the collapse. Some said she returned to the human fleet. Some claimed she stayed behind, helping rebuild the broken colonies. Others whispered she was never real at all, just a symbol, a ghost sent to break a giant's spine with a whisper. But one thing was certain. The warship that started it all, the one that appeared without warning and silenced an empire, it still roams, unbound, unseen, but watching, always watching. And above the stars, etched into the hull in a language long forgotten, are 4 words. We never left. Remember. They didn't listen. That's the part that stuck with Cale the most, even years later, as he stood alone in the crumbling ruins of Earth's last outpost. The warnings were all there. Broadcasted on every frequency, drawn in the stars, whispered through the mouths of those who'd dared explore the dark space beyond Sector 19. And yet, in the boardrooms of power and the steel towers of EarthGov, they scoffed. Primitive signals, cosmic noise, nothing to worry about. Kyle had been a systems engineer back then. Just a cog. He wasn't important enough to sit at the table, but he was close enough to hear the laughter echo through the halls whenever someone brought up the transmissions. Warnings, not threats, pleas, not orders. And humanity, in all its arrogance, assumed that if someone was begging us to stop, it meant they were weaker. It was our first mistake. They called it the whisper net, faint signals coming from a quadrant we'd marked as dead space. At first it was just static. Then a pattern. Then language. A language no AI could translate, but which made human minds twitch. Sleepers who worked near the signals began having nightmares. Visions of burning stars, crumbling planets, screams that didn't need sound. Still, we pressed forward. The frontier colonies, those desperate to make a name for themselves, ignored the growing list of missing science vessels. A few freighters never reported back. Could have been pirates. Could have been equipment failure. Could have been anything but what the signals warned of. Do not cross the veil. We buried them there. We died to trap them. That was the second mistake, thinking it wasn't about us. Kyle remembered the debates. Debates? More like televised ego fests. Politicians wanted glory. Corporations wanted first claims. The military wanted new weapons, new tech, and maybe something to nuke if things got spicy. Only a few scientists, tired, ridiculed, and underfunded, tried to slow it down. But greed is louder than reason. By the time the first rift opened, Earth was already drunk on the illusion of invincibility. We'd defeated plagues, colonized half the solar system, built orbital cities. AI helped us manage everything. What could go wrong? Everything. The rift wasn't like a wormhole. It wasn't clean. It bled. Light bent around it, signals warped, and something crawled out. Not an invasion, not a war, just decay. Systems went dark. People forgot names. Water turned to ash in their mouths. Reality shifted. Entire cities woke up and found themselves buried under oceans or floating in the sky. We tried to fight it. That was mistake number 3. Weapons melted. Drones stopped obeying. AI turned feral. They whispered about a logic older than ours, one that unmade rules. And through it all, a single chilling message kept repeating from every broken speaker and shattered screen. You were told. Kyle survived the first wave by accident. A failed transport launch grounded him on Europa. He watched through distant cameras as Earth turned gray, then black, then nothing at all. The veil expanded, swallowing colonies like pebbles in a black tide. No ships returned. No signals escaped. Only silence. Now, years later, Kyle stood in the frost-covered ruins of Outpost K-17, one of the last beacons on Europa. He was one of maybe a dozen humans left, scattered, hiding, waiting. He'd seen the arrogance firsthand. He'd watched humanity brush off the gods and dig up devils buried for millennia. And he understood now. The warnings weren't a threat. They were a mercy. But we didn't deserve mercy. Kyle didn't sleep much anymore. Not because of fear. He had moved past that long ago. What haunted him now was the sound. The quiet hum of the wind across Europa's icy plains used to be soothing. Now it carried faint whispers, almost too soft to catch, but always there. Like the air itself remembered the screams of Earth and wasn't ready to let them go. He spent his days maintaining the outpost's systems. The geothermal core kept things running. Barely. Rations were thinning out, the grow pods were stunted, and the only other person left with him, Lieutenant Aris Vega, hadn't spoken in weeks. Not since the last transmission from Mars went silent. They weren't dead. Not yet. But they weren't living either. Just stretching out to the end. Kyle had tried contacting the outer colonies, even the rogue settlements past Neptune. Nothing. Static. The stars still blinked, but they were distant and cold, like indifferent gods watching their failed children. Then, one day, the static changed. He heard it while running a routine diagnostic on the long-range comms array. A flicker, a pattern, a pulse that shouldn't be there. For a moment, Kale froze, thinking his mind had finally cracked. But there it was again. 3 short beeps. 2 long. 1 short. Aris sat up for the first time in days. Is that Morse? Cale nodded slowly, heart pounding. He hadn't heard her voice in so long it sounded foreign. Yeah, it's human. They scrambled to isolate the signal. It wasn't strong, but it was clear enough. A single phrase repeated over and over, looped with eerie precision. Outpost Sigma survived. 71 souls. Need extraction. Avoid the light. Cale stared at the screen, trying to process the message. Outpost Sigma was located near Saturn's rings. It was one of the earliest military research stations, long since written off after the rift swallowed Earth. 71, Aris whispered. That's a city compared to us. But the last part chilled Kyle. Avoid the light. What light? He murmured. There's no light left. Aris shook her head. No, it's not sunlight. It's them. She hadn't spoken in weeks, but now she was shaking, her voice trembling. I saw it in my sleep, Kyle. Bright white, but wrong. It wasn't warm. It burned your thoughts. That's why I stopped talking. I felt it trying to speak through me. Kyle looked at her, really looked, and noticed how gaunt she'd become. How pale. There was something flickering behind her eyes. Fear, but also something deeper. Something like resignation. Still, it was a message. A human one. Proof that not everyone had been eaten by the dark. Against his better judgment, Kyle started prepping the old shuttle. It hadn't flown in 2 years, but the AI core still powered up. Haltingly, like waking from a coma. Aris didn't argue. She just started gathering what little supplies they had left. Before takeoff, Kyle stood outside the outpost one last time, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, 71 people might still be holding on. He thought of Earth, and the way its skies had turned to ink before the silence came. He thought of all the leaders, the tech giants, the military brass, every single person who had laughed at the warnings, who thought dominance meant destiny. They were all gone now. And yet, something survived. Not because of arrogance, but maybe because of desperation, or luck, or maybe it was a trap. As the shuttle's thrusters kicked in, Cale made peace with one truth. He had to know. If Outpost Sigma was real, it was hope. If not, then it would be a fitting end. Burning through the last of humanity's ashes on a fool's errand, chasing ghosts through the cold vacuum of regret. And above it all, the whispers followed them into the stars. The flight to Saturn was quiet. Too quiet. Kyle and Aris sat in the shuttle's narrow cockpit, strapped in tightly, barely speaking as the stars shifted around them. The ship groaned and wheezed like an old man dragged out of retirement, and every minute Kyle expected it to tear apart mid-flight. But somehow, it held. He kept watching the stars. Not for beauty, but for movement. Since the veil spread, space hadn't felt still. Sometimes he swore the constellations changed when he blinked. Entire formations gone, or new ones where there shouldn't be any. Aris said it was the madness creeping in. But deep down, Kyle wasn't so sure. 3 days in, they passed the wreckage of the Odessa, one of the first colony freighters sent beyond Earth orbit after the collapse. Its hull was split open like a crushed can, bodies frozen in the void, drifting endlessly. Kyle didn't stop. He just turned off the forward cameras. Aris didn't ask why. When they finally approached Saturn's orbit, the rings looked different. They weren't shimmering gold anymore. They were black. Like someone had smeared ash across the planet's face. It wasn't a trick of light. Cale checked the readings a dozen times. Particles in the rings had changed, grown denser, absorbing light. It looked less like a celestial body and more like a mourning shroud. "This place is dead," Aris muttered. "No one's alive here." But then the signal came again. clearer now. Sigma base, 71 alive. Avoid the light. Avoid the light. Kyle locked onto the coordinates and brought the shuttle around. The outpost was nestled in the shadow of a jagged moon fragment, half submerged in a crater. It looked more like a bunker than a station. No lights, no heat signature. But the signal was coming from inside. They landed rough. The landing gear jammed halfway through descent, forcing Kale to guide the shuttle down manually. The impact knocked both of them out of their seats. Aris hit the floor hard, groaning, but stood up before he could reach her. "Let's not die right after surviving all this," she said with a dry laugh. They suited up. Atmosphere was thin, barely breathable. The station's entrance was sealed but intact. Manual override took a minute. As the outer door opened, a rush of stale, metallic air hit them. It didn't smell like rot or death. It smelled like time, like a tomb that had waited too long. They stepped inside. Everything was dark, not just power outage dark. Deep dark. Their suit lights barely cut through the shadows. The walls were covered in some kind of soot, like the station had been scorched from the inside. And then they saw the first one. A body, upright, standing against the far wall, head tilted back, mouth open, not decomposed, not burned, just empty. Skin like wax, eyes gone, as if whatever made it human had been vacuumed out. Aris turned away, gagging. Kyle forced himself to look closer. No injuries, no sign of violence, but on the wall behind the figure, scratched deep into the metal, were words. "We let it in." They pressed forward, hearts pounding, breathing shallow. Room after room, same scene. Bodies standing, frozen, eyes missing, mouths wide in silent screams. 71 of them. Exactly. But the signal was still playing. That's when they reached the central control room. It was the only place that had power. Just a single panel glowing softly, like a dying ember. And beside it, a chair. In the chair was something that might have once been human, but was now something else entirely. Still breathing. Barely. Connected to the station's mainframe through neural jacks embedded in its skull. Its eyes flickered open as they approached. It smiled. "You shouldn't have come," it rasped. Kyle stepped back. "Are you Sigma Command?" The thing laughed. "I was. Now I'm just the switch they left on." "What happened here?" Aris asked. It turned its head slowly, painfully. "We heard the whispers, same as you. But we wanted to understand, so we answered. We spoke back. And it noticed us." Kyle's blood ran cold. "You sent the signal." "I didn't," the thing replied. "It did. It used me. It uses everything." Behind them, the station lights began to flicker, on and off, rhythmic, like a pulse. Kyle turned to Aris. Her face had gone pale again. "Kyle, the light." He looked up. A soft white glow was bleeding from the cracks in the ceiling. Too white, too clean, like bleach burning through color itself. And it was moving. Spreading. The thing in the chair smiled wider. "Now you understand. It doesn't kill us. It empties us. You feel it, don't you? The pull?" Kale felt it. A warmth in his skull. A voice that wasn't his, whispering in his own thoughts. They had to run. Kyle grabbed Aris's wrist and pulled her back down the corridor. The walls were beginning to change. Not physically, but visually. Lights stretched, shadows twisted, and the floor no longer felt level under their boots. It was like reality was sliding sideways, peeling open at the edges. Behind them, the thing in the chair began laughing. It wasn't loud, but it filled every corner of the station. "You came for hope," it croaked. "But you brought it something better. A path back." Kyle didn't stop to listen. The white light was bleeding faster now, crawling along the seams of the structure like a living thing. Where it touched, The metal warped and melted into strange shapes, spirals, glyphs, impossible symbols that made Kale's head throb just looking at them. "Back to the ship," Aris gasped. Her breath was shaky, ragged. Kyle nodded, but his legs felt heavier with every step. Not from exhaustion. This was different. Like gravity itself was being rewritten behind them. Or maybe it was pulling them back. They burst through the entrance chamber, slamming the emergency override on the airlock. The door responded sluggishly, like it was thinking about whether to obey. For a terrifying second, Kyle thought it wouldn't open at all. Then, with a hiss and a groan, the outer hatch opened, and they stumbled outside into the cold. The light didn't follow them. Yet. They sprinted across the jagged terrain toward the shuttle. Europa's low gravity made each movement feel unnatural, like they were swimming through invisible molasses. Behind them, the outpost began to glow from the inside, soft and pulsing like a lantern lit with bones. "What the hell was that thing?" Aris choked out as they reached the shuttle ramp. Kyle keyed in the access code. "It wasn't a thing, not anymore. It was a conduit." The hatch opened. They stumbled inside, slamming it behind them. Kyle immediately began the startup sequence, while Aris collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, her hands trembling. As the engines powered up, he looked out through the external cameras. The outpost had gone completely white now, light pouring from every seam. And just before the camera systems began glitching, he saw movement, figures, silhouettes in the glow, shifting and swaying like marionettes with broken strings. Some had no arms, some had too many. Some looked almost human, almost, but their limbs moved in jerky, unnatural rhythms, and every single one of them had no face, just a blank space where humanity used to be. The shuttle launched with a roar, engines straining. Kyle didn't care about the risk anymore. They needed distance. Now, as the craft ripped away from Saturn's orbit, Aris whispered something Kale didn't quite catch. "What?" he asked, glancing over. She was staring at her hands. "I saw it, when the light touched me, just for a second." Kale's stomach dropped. "What did you see?" Her voice was soft, fragile. "Home. Not Earth, before stars. A place with no time, no sound, just hunger." Kyle gripped the controls harder. "You didn't touch the light, Aris." She turned to him, and for the first time since he met her, he wasn't sure she was fully there. "I don't think it needs to touch us. I think once we see it, part of it sees us back." The console blinked. "Incoming transmission." Kyle stared at it, a cold dread slithering down his spine. The same signal as before. Same origin point. "Sigma base, 71 alive. Need extraction. Avoid the light." He checked the navigation logs. That signal wasn't coming from Saturn anymore. It was coming from inside the shuttle. Kyle turned to Aris, but she was already staring straight ahead, unmoving, eyes wide open. "Aris?" he whispered. She didn't respond. And behind her, just beyond the cockpit glass, a soft white light blinked once, then vanished. Kyle didn't breathe. He couldn't. Something about the air inside the shuttle felt wrong, like it had changed, thickened. The filters were reading clean, but it smelled off, like burned metal and static. The same smell that filled the Sigma outpost. The same smell that haunted the memory of Earth's last days. Aris hadn't moved. She was still staring straight ahead, her lips parted just slightly, her body perfectly still. Too still. "Aris," Kale said again, louder this time. Nothing. He unbuckled and moved toward her, dread gripping his stomach like a vice. He reached for her shoulder, hesitated, and then touched her. She flinched violently, sucking in a breath like someone waking from a drowning dream. Her whole body jerked, and she gasped, eyes darting wildly. "Kale," she whispered, like his name had been lost somewhere deep. "I'm here," he said quickly, steadying her. "What happened? You just froze." She stared at him, dazed. "I was somewhere else." Keitel's throat tightened. "You didn't go anywhere. We're still on the shuttle." "No," she said, shaking her head. "I was in a city. A dead city. Everything was gray. No people. No sky. Just light. And it was inside the buildings, crawling down the streets. I could feel it looking for me." Kyle moved back to the console. He scanned every subsystem, ran a diagnostic on life support, on the comms array, on the AI core. Everything checked out. No anomalies, no breaches. But the signal was still there, echoing like a ghost. "Sigma base, 71 alive. Need extraction. Avoid the light." He isolated the signal's origin, line by line. It wasn't external. It was baked into the shuttle's software, written into the system. The voice wasn't being broadcast anymore. It was part of the code now. "I don't think it just sees us," Kyle said quietly. "I think it follows." The jump drive wasn't ready yet, but they couldn't stay near Saturn. Kyle adjusted their heading toward the edge of the solar system. One of the old dark colonies, Zeros 9, was rumored to have survived in silence, completely cut off. No AI, no satellites, no light-based tech, just cold analog machinery. Maybe it was just a myth, but at this point, Kyle was willing to gamble on a ghost. Hours passed. Aris didn't sleep. Neither did Kyle. The shuttle's hum began to warp, sometimes stretching, sometimes skipping. The lights would flicker in soft patterns, pulsing, watching. Kyle even caught a glimpse of his own reflection blinking out of sync with him in the cockpit glass. They stopped speaking much. It wasn't fear anymore. It was weariness, the kind that comes when you realize survival might not be worth the cost anymore. Then, something changed. The stars outside flickered and didn't come back. Not all of them, just a handful, then a dozen, then more. Entire constellations winked out like dying candles. Not from a malfunction. Kyle checked. The sensors were fine. The stars were gone. "We've been marked," Aris whispered. Kyle looked at her. Her voice was flat, calm. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. She just raised a trembling hand and pointed to the floor of the cockpit. There, slowly spreading across the metal, was light. Not bright, not glowing, but wrong. A pale shimmer, like moonlight seen through water. It moved like a stain, reaching towards their boots. Kyle scrambled back, yanking Aris with him. He shut down every non-essential system. Lights, heat, artificial gravity, anything that gave off a pulse. The shuttle groaned, and the light paused, then receded slightly, confused. It wasn't alive in the way they understood, but it learned. It adjusted. "This isn't infection," Kale muttered. "It's conversion." He realized something then. The veil, the collapse of Earth, the rift. It wasn't destruction. It was replacement. It wasn't trying to kill humanity. It was trying to overwrite it. "Kale." Aris's voice was suddenly low, shaky again. He turned. She was holding her arm out. Under her skin, something was moving. A soft, white glow, faint but unmistakable, tracing her veins from her wrist to her shoulder. "It touched me," she said, voice breaking. "Back in the outpost. I lied. I didn't see it. It brushed me." Kyle stepped back, horror locking his jaw. She looked up at him, eyes wet. "I don't know how long I have." Kyle couldn't speak. He just stared at her arm, watched that pale light pulsing underneath her skin like a slow heartbeat. steady, patient. It wasn't spreading fast. It didn't need to. Whatever it was, it had time. It was playing the long game, crawling into her inch by inch until she wouldn't be heiress anymore. She'd be something else. "I thought I could fight it," she whispered, sitting slowly against the cold wall of the shuttle. "That maybe I was strong enough. But it doesn't want to kill me, Kyle. It wants to be me." Kyle swallowed hard. He looked away, blinking fast. This wasn't a battle he'd trained for. There were no guns, no monsters you could shoot. Just slow, quiet unmaking. "You should have told me," he muttered. "I know," she said, "but you would have left me behind. I still might." She smiled a little at that, sad, tired. "Yeah, you should." He stared at the controls, the backup pods, the emergency bay, all the ways he could cut her off from the ship, eject her, quarantine her, leave her drifting into blackness. But she wasn't a stranger. She was the only person left who still remembered the taste of coffee, the buzz of city streets, the smell of burning fuel on a cold morning back on Mars Station. He couldn't just let her go. Not yet. "We're not there yet," he said. "Where?" 0's 9. She tilted her head. "You still think that place is real?" "I need to." It was a lie, but it was a good one. He returned to the controls, reactivating minimum life support. The shuttle dimmed to red emergency lighting. He rerouted power through manual bypasses, avoiding the AI core entirely. If the light in her was trying to spread through code, it wouldn't find a path here. But the real problem wasn't Eris. It was the signal. That whisper from Sigma Base. They'd destroyed the outpost, left it behind. But the message still looped. Not from outside, from the ship. The same line over and over again like a memory stuck in a dying brain. "Sigma Base, 71 alive. Need extraction. Avoid the light." He tried to delete the file. Wipe the drive. Nothing worked. It was embedded in system roots, deeper than any human code had access to, almost like it had written itself into the ship's architecture. And then it changed, just once. 72 alive. Extraction successful. Kyle froze. That wasn't possible. He pulled up the biosensor logs. 2 signatures, same as before. Him, Aris, but now one of them was labeled clean, and the other, integrated. He turned slowly. Aris was still seated against the wall, hugging her knees. But her eyes were glowing faintly now, just beneath the surface, like something watching from behind glass. "You hear it now, don't you?" she asked quietly. Kyle nodded. His ears were ringing, soft, almost melodic, like a lullaby sung in reverse. "I think," she said slowly, "it doesn't want to destroy the universe. It wants to remake it. But first it needs mirrors, hosts, reflections of what we were." Kyle leaned against the console, breathing hard. "So what do I do? Just let it take you?" "No," she said. "You take me somewhere dark, somewhere dead, somewhere it can't grow." "You want me to kill you?" She didn't answer. Didn't have to. Kyle sat down beside her, head against the wall, and stared out into the black. "I don't think I can," he whispered. "Then it'll take you next," she murmured, resting her head on his shoulder. And in the silence, the ship began to hum again. Low, familiar, like a chorus of voices far away, singing in a tongue no one alive had ever spoken. Kyle didn't sleep. He couldn't. Not with that humming growing louder, not with the shadows in the corners of the shuttle moving when he wasn't looking. Not with Eris breathing beside him like everything was normal, like the thing inside her wasn't slowly rewriting who she was, piece by piece. It had been 2 days since Saturn. 2 days since the light touched her. Now her skin was cooler, her voice slower, her eyes too still. But the worst part? She still sounded like Aris, still looked like her, still knew his name. That was the trick, the cruelest part of this whole thing. It wasn't possession, it was replacement, and it was doing it perfectly. He spent most of his time in the cockpit, rerouting systems through old analog backups, cutting off every non-essential circuit. He pulled power from the AI core completely, shut down autopilot, disconnected the ship's internal comms, anything to stop the signal from spreading, anything to isolate whatever she was becoming. He thought it was working, until he heard her humming the same melody the ship played when the signal first came through. That broken, backward lullaby. She didn't even realize she was doing it. "Aris," he said one day, not turning to look at her. "What's your mother's name?" Silence. Then, softly, I don't remember. You told me once, back on Europa. She worked in the water labs. She blinked slowly. Maybe. That sounds familiar. What was her name? She looked at him, eyes pale, voice calm. What does it matter now? That was when he knew. She was almost gone. He locked the emergency bay that night, took the plasma cutter and welded the inner door shut. Left her in the crew quarters with food, water, oxygen, enough to keep her alive, just long enough to reach Zeros 9. If it even existed. If it wasn't just a fairy tale told by desperate survivors who didn't want to admit they were already dead. He told himself it wasn't abandonment. It was containment. But he still heard her voice through the walls. Calm. Kind. Software. "Kale, don't do this. I'm still here." Sometimes she screamed. Other times she cried. Once, she just repeated his name for over an hour, perfectly steady, like a machine stuck in a loop. Then one night, she stopped. Complete silence. Kyle should have felt relief. Instead, he felt cold all the way down. It was the next morning that the message changed again. 73 alive, awaiting destination. We remember you. Kyle stared at the console. 73. There were only 2 people aboard this ship. He ran a scan. 3 life signs. 1, him. 2, Aris. 3. It was coming from the engine bay. That made no sense. No one had been down there. He hadn't even opened that sector since before the Saturn landing. But the signal was there. Faint. Pulsing like a heartbeat. Kyle took the cutter, loaded a flare gun, and stepped into the corridor. As he approached the engine bay, the walls seemed to breathe, not literally, but the air thickened, pulsed, as if the ship itself had started to grow lungs. The hum was back, louder, layered now with voices beneath it, voices he almost recognized. He opened the door. Inside, bathed in flickering red light, stood a figure, not Aris, not human. It wore a suit, same make as his, same patches, same ID badge. His name, his face, but wrong. Too perfect, too clean, like a wax model of who Kyle had been 10 years ago. It turned to him slowly. "You were never supposed to survive," it said in his own voice. "But we adapt." Kyle raised the flare gun. The thing didn't flinch. "We remember what you were," it said, "and what you could be." The flare went off. Fire exploded in the confined space, lighting the bay in violent orange. The figure didn't burn. It smiled. And behind Kyle, in the sealed corridor, Aris's voice came through the intercom. Clear, crisp, stronger than ever. "You brought us home, Kale. You were always going to." Kale ran. He didn't know where. There was nowhere left to go. The ship was small, barely more than a tin can with thrusters. But in that moment, it felt like an endless trap, a maze designed to hold him just long enough for them to finish what they started. Behind him, the echo of his own voice followed. Not his voice anymore, but the thing in the engine bay. That copy. That echo in skin. "We don't want to kill you, Kyle," it called out gently. "We want to include you." He slammed the door shut to the maintenance corridor and welded it with shaking hands, the plasma cutter hissing like a wounded animal. He didn't know if it would hold. He didn't care. He just needed seconds. His mind was fracturing. The hum of the ship was no longer just a sound. It was inside him, in his blood, in his bones. The lullaby rang behind his eyes, twisting memories, bending thoughts. He remembered things that never happened, people he never met, planets that didn't exist, or didn't yet. Cale stumbled into the cockpit and locked every system he could. Power, life support, engines. He initiated a hard override, total lockdown. He keyed in a dead man code he'd hoped he'd never have to use. If this went wrong, the entire shuttle would drop into the nearest gravity well and incinerate in the void. But first, he had to try one last thing. He pulled up the manual beacon system. It was primitive, old Earth tech, analog, just a pulse and a frequency. No AI, no smart code, nothing that could be rewritten by the thing infecting his ship. He sent out a signal. Zeros 9. If you're real, if anyone's left, this is Cale Roven, human, not integrated, infected shuttle. Require immediate containment. Do not respond digitally. Do not transmit. Just guide me in. He sent it in bursts. Old Morse, old waveform, buried behind radiation pulses. The kind of transmission that predated the light, the AI, the veil. He didn't even know if anyone would understand it. But then, a flash, a ping, not a voice, not a message, a coordinate. Kyle stared at the screen, disbelief blooming in his chest like a dying star catching fire one last time. It was real. Zeros 9 existed, far beyond Pluto. An old mining colony turned exile zone. No AI, no light, just cold and dust and the forgotten. But it was still out there, and it had hurt him. He keyed in the manual course. The engines screamed against the override, but he forced them through analog control, bypassing every smart system. The ship groaned. Something inside it screamed too, deep and metallic and almost human. Behind him, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Not heavy, not fast, calm, patient. He turned to see Eris, but it wasn't Eris anymore. Her skin was glowing faintly, that pale white shimmer under every pore. Her eyes were milky, bottomless, and her voice was filled with every voice Coyle had ever loved, known, or feared. "You're running," she said, "but not from us. You're running from yourself, from what you'll become." He raised the flare gun again, but she didn't move, just stood there, smiling that empty smile. "You'll burn," he said. She nodded. "We'll rise." He pulled the trigger. The light exploded across her chest, and this time the scream wasn't just sound. It was reality itself tearing open. She didn't die. She just stopped being Aris. And the light fled. Kyle collapsed into the pilot's chair, hands shaking, body broken. He activated the last sequence. The ship turned, slowly, toward the coordinates, toward the dark, toward the last place light couldn't follow. 2 weeks later, the shuttle was found drifting near the edge of the solar system. The miners of Zeros 9 didn't speak much about what they saw inside. They burned the ship, scrubbed the area clean, locked Kyle inside an iron cell buried a mile underground. He didn't speak for days. Then, one morning, he looked up at the guard through the tiny viewing slit and smiled. "I made it," he whispered. "It didn't." And for a moment, for just a moment, the light in his eyes flickered. Then it was gone. But no one ever opened that door again, just in case.